the Father's Day, shall we call it? It's not really a competition, but I wanted to put you in the mood with some jokes about fathers. Now, the following are all replies that Detroit women have written on child support agency forms in the section for listing father's details, which means basically, who was it? Now, these are supposed to be verbatim from the forms. I do not know the name of the father of my little girl. She was conceived at a party at 3600 East Grand Boulevard, where I had sex with a man I met that night. I do remember that the sex was so good that I fainted. Now, if you do manage to track down the father, can you please send me his phone number? Thanks. Another form. I don't know the identity of the father of my daughter. He drives a BMW that now has a hole made by my stiletto in one of the door panels. Perhaps you can contact BMW service stations in this area and see if he's had it replaced. The next. I have never had sex with a man. I am still a Virginian. I'm awaiting a letter from the Pope confirming that my son's conception was ejaculate. And that he is the Savior risen again. Tyrone Hairston is the father of child A. If you do catch up with him, can you ask him what he did with my AC/DC CDs? Child B, who was also born at the same time, well, I don't have a clue. Now, the last one here is, I am unsure as to the identity of the father of my baby. After all, like when you eat a can of beans, you can't be sure which one made you fart. Okay, our meditation today will be led by Captain Phelps. Our speakers today are Lau'ana and Jeanne Green. Lau'ana will tell us about Moringa oleifera, which is believed by many botanists to be the most nutritious tree on the planet. Also, the moringa is said to have healing effects for over 300 diseases. Lau'ana will tell us how to grow it and eat it. Jeanne Green is a lifelong gardener and serious plant junkie. Among her areas of particular interest are orchids, succulents, and aquatic plants. She is also an expert in planting by the moon, and I think she's also going to chime in on moringa. So let us welcome Lau'ana.
We have a lot to cover today. I first of all want to welcome everyone here. Can you hear me back there? Good. I'm glad there's interest in the moringa. It's a very exciting tree. Being a lover of trees and also into health and environment things, I'm really excited about this project. I have a lot to cover, so I want to really move on because Jeannie's going to tell you how to actually plant the tree and answer your questions on growing the tree. how to harvest it, and I want to give her time to do all that. I first learned about the moringa tree. I went to an international conference in March of 2010 in Chapala called the Living Lakes International Conference. And after that conference, I was really interested in finding out natural ways to clean water and to clean lakes. And I went online and I found this information on the moringa tree and saw online a picture of a quart jar with moringa seeds in it and dirty water. And they were letting it set, and afterwards it purified water. So when I was looking at the site about moringa, I found out all the other marvelous things that it does, and I was very, very excited. I spent several weeks focused on researching everything I could find about the moringa. So that's how my interest started in it. That was March of 2010. And a few months later, I was able to obtain some moringa seeds locally. So I planted some in really big pots, in the courtyard. A couple seeds in each pot, and this was June of 2010. So that was rainy season, and it was really amazing to see how fast that these trees were taking off. Actually, I had 3 crops of leaves the first year, and the dried leaves of the moringa is the most nutritious part of the tree. You can use all kinds of parts of the trees, the seeds, the pods, the flowers, which are used for coals, and of course the leaves, fresh or dried. So in November, December 2010, seeing that the trees were growing in my courtyard, I needed some land to experiment with them in a bigger way. And Rancho Salud, Heidi and Sarah, offered near San Juan Cotala their land there to do some experimentation with it. And Barbara Shermer joined me at that time, and we spent about a year to 14 months, every month planting different times of the month, different soils, sand and dirt, peat moss, various ways to research the growing of moringa. Well, I can tell you this much, November, December is not the time to put seeds into the ground. They did not develop, it was too cold. So we were able to bring the seedlings into little pots into the seed room, and there we worked with the seeds and baby moringas, which she still now is growing baby moringa trees for sale. But it was very successful there, and then we took them into the greenhouse along the side, and eventually had to take them out of there due to a challenging situation with some ants. And the ants and animals, I will tell you, do love the leaves of the moringa, so be aware of that. Okay, in 2011, since we were beginning to really see that the trees could grow here, normally they grow at 2,000 to 3,000 feet, and we're over 5,000 feet, so I wasn't sure that they could grow here. So when we found out that they could grow here, we developed a booklet of instructions and photographs, step by step, on how to plant the trees, how to harvest it, and a lot of information on the moringa. It's called Growing Moringa Trees for Nutrition and Medicine. And Cindy Stowe, who's here today with a camera, she photographed all of the booklet and really was great in doing the graphic layout. I want to honor today some of the people that have been very supportive in this whole project. So I'll be mentioning names, and at the end of this, we'll have them all stand up and honor them. So then in 2011, after the booklet was out, we did our first public meetings and articles were published about Moringa. It was April 2011 that the first article in the Chapala Review came out. And then Barbara and I talked at the Green Group. We're about 80 people. It was really surprising because it was May and we didn't think anyone would show up. And so that was great. Recognizing people here in the audience. Thank you for coming. We also talked with farmers groups at the Hotel Pericle. And Carrie, she was here, there you are, helped me with translating, and we educated farmers there. In this year also, Paye, an organic farmer from Chapala, who taught organic farming, was very helpful in taking a lot of the Moringa seeds free and the booklets free to various villages from here to Mexico City, because he had knowledge and experiences with these various villages. So he took a lot of the materials and educated farmers in that area. So in 2012, we planted some trees in a small village west of Chapala. That was Jeannie Green and Barbara and myself. Lamont is here too. He has some land over west of Chapala and offered for us to experiment growing the trees actually in the ground. And so that was really our first experiment. We only took 15, 16 seeds over there, and it was warmer weather, and they did well. I haven't been over there for a while, but the last I was over there, the trees were about 12 to 15 feet high. So they were fine. That was planted really near the lake, where the watershed underneath to draw water from. Then in 2012, I believe it was, that distributors appeared to market Moringa, and that's Dee Dee and Dave, who are here today also. And they market the Moringa at various local markets. So now it's available on Monday and Friday markets. And Kalina's here. Recently she started selling the Moringa at the organic market on Tuesday. I believe it's now in the granary, is that correct? So there are stores now opening up, selling the Moringa products and making it more available to you. Okay, and that comes in powdered form, leaf tea form, the booklets, the seeds, and I think some future products are happening also with Moringa. So that brings it up to this year. In 2013, January, Karuna approached me. She had gone down to Chiapas, Mexico, and with her tour group, and had made connections with 6 villages of farmers, various farmers there, and was willing to take seeds and booklets. So they took 100 seeds and 5 booklets to each village, 600 seeds and 30 booklets. So that was wonderful. Thank you. We have continued meetings with Santa Cruz. They're very much interested, the farmers in Santa Cruz. I want to thank Alberto, who's also here today, who does all the coordination for us for bringing the Moringa group to Santa Cruz and answering questions to the farmers, and that includes Barbara and Jeannie and Diana, a new person, and Hans, and a number of us that do that. So thanks, Alberto, for that work. We did speak at Santa Cruz to about, I think, 70 people on Sunday morning, and that was very successful. We gave out tortillas, thanks to Barbara and her husband, with Moringa tortillas, and we had drinks, moringa drink samples to give to everybody there so that they could see some of the ways and taste how it is. Thanks to Hans, who has helped us with the economics of how many trees to put into a hectare of land and all of those things. I'm not very good at that, so we have some people that are helping out with that, and coordinating with the Santa Cruz farmers also. We've given quite a few seeds to the south shore of the lake. So now several farmers one has a hectare of land and is planning to grow seeds in the south shore. There's a farmer in St. Nicholas that is planning to grow orchards of moringa to experiment with moringa oil. And the moringa oil can be used for so many things. Cooking, it's great for anti-aging, removing wrinkles for the women, or men too, I guess. And for lamp oil and all kinds of soaps, shampoos, different things. So that's another avenue of products. So at this time, I would like to really honor some of these people with the following. Please stand. Barbara Shermer, Carrie, my translator. Please stand. Stay standing, please. Cindy Stowe, with the camera. There you are, over there. Lamont, who helps with the website server. It's down right now, but he promises it'll be up this week. And he's also with his land in Alberto with the coordination with Santa Cruz and the farmers. Dee Dee and Dave, the distributors. Karuna, who took the, please stand, Karuna, some moringa to the villages in Chiapas. Paye, I don't think is here today. Jaime and Sarah, I'm not sure that they're here. Jeannie Green, of course, is going to talk later and tell us how to grow the moringa. Hans, you're here, I know, I saw you. Yeah, thank you. Diane, are you here? Ah, she's way in the back. She just joined us recently from Chapala. And then let's give them a big hand. Also, there's been a few others like Sven, who was with me in the beginning with the research, and Gail Clayton, and anybody else that I've forgotten, please forgive me. So I'm going to jump into just a little overview of the health and benefits for somebody that's new. How many have never heard about moringa? So there are a few here. Okay. It has wonderful healing properties. It's anti-cancer, antibacterial, antivirus. It's considered to be one of the most perfect survival foods. It's known for over 300 diseases, as it was mentioned, and there's over 700 medical and scientific reports that have been written and verify the medicinal and the nutritional properties and the benefits of the moringa tree. One of the most well-known reports is by Dr. Jed Fahey of Johns Hopkins Medical School in the Department of Pharmacology and Molecular Sciences, and it's found in a journal called Trees for Life. And if you want that website, see me afterwards. I do have a copy of it in my book here also. By the way, the international organization Trees for Life has planted over 30 million moringa trees around the world to feed the hungry and for medicinal purposes to third world countries. There are over 400 names of moringa, so if you go online, you'll need to look at many of the other names. In Asia, it started, and the drumstick tree, miracle tree, malunggay tree, many, many different names. So you need to research many names if you're really going to do a research. Some of the diseases that are supporting better health or disease recovery are arthritis, epilepsy, asthma, parasites, Epstein-Barr, the herpes virus, bronchitis, ulcers, gastritis, prostate disorders, kidney, pain, gout, lupus, edema, certain types of cancer. Also, Moringa benefits conditions of diabetes. We've had local testimonials on diabetes and several on cancer. Liver conditions, nervous disorders, painful joints, skin infections, insect bites, fungus, cholesterol, and thyroid conditions, as well as a common cold, which I've also personally used. Use the flowers of the moringa tree, and you can either dry them and keep them for a tea or use them fresh in a tea, and it nips the cold. By the next day it was gone. And one of the big things for moringa is fatigue. It really gives you energy. So that's just a few of the many benefits. As we said, it's very, very nutritious. I think the thing that makes it very unique is for a plant, it has all the essential amino acids for the body, and that's pretty unusual. Usually that's in an animal product. So it has all the essential amino acids, rich in omega oils 3, 6, and 9. Very high in chlorophyll. It has 3 times potassium as bananas, 2 times the protein as milk, 4 times the vitamin A as in carrots, 4 times the calcium as milk, 7 times the vitamin C as oranges, 46 antioxidants, and over 36 anti-inflammatory compounds. So it relieves joint and muscle pain, it strengthens the immune system, and it enables better sleep, balances the blood sugar, and normalizes blood pressure, lowers cholesterol and triglycerides, and many other things. But it also has detoxification properties. So it will also detoxify the body. And in our new booklet that's been revised, we added a recipe for those that have chronic disease to go slower, take a smaller amount, and then gradually increase because of the detoxifying. But there is no adverse reactions or no impurities with moringa. So to summarize what's happened, one of the most nutritious trees on the planet, and it grows very, very fast. Like I said, I had 3 crops of leaves the first year. All the parts of the trees can be used, and many products can be developed from the moringa tree. So it is a cash crop in many, many third world countries because they can, every 3-4 months you have a new crop and it brings in cash. Personally, I feel we've reached our mission statement goal, the first step of it right now, which was to have moringa growing in the fields around the lake and to provide nutrition and medicine for people around the lake. And I think with the hectares of land that are going up now and orchards and farmers that are now growing moringa, will have our own source of supply here locally instead of shipping it in from other parts of Mexico. So that's very exciting to me. I think we'll be seeing other products coming besides the moringa oil. I myself have a couple in mind. I don't want to mention yet. I want to test them out. And I'm sure there are going to be other products also. Since September of last year to the present, that's about 8 months, and with this last batch of seeds that we purchased recently, when all these seeds are distributed, in the 8 months prior, we will have distributed a total of 23,620 moringa tree seeds. That's very exciting to me. Nearly 2,000 of our instructional booklets have been distributed in the last 2 years, and over $5,000 of personal funds have been contributed this past year. Again, I want to thank everyone who has supported us in this endeavor and all of your interest in this project. The booklet proceeds go to buy seeds for the farmers. We don't give unlimited seeds, but 300 to 500 seeds to the farmers. So that helps them. Our future plans, we're in the process of putting together a Moringa recipe book. So we'll have various kinds of recipes. And if you have any that you'd like to share with us, please let us know. We'd love to include them. And next week we meet with Todd Storm, who was here last week, speaker, with some of us in the Moringa group, to discuss another new project that he wants to talk to us about. So that'll happen this coming week. So a lot is happening. And we feel that growing Moringa locally can not only support the area with nutritional and medicinal needs on a personal level, but it can support farmers and jobs financially in the area. And it all started about 2.5 years ago. And just want to close with one quote from the Los Angeles Times. It's on our booklet too. What they wrote about Moringa. Scientifically speaking, Moringa sounds like magic. It can rebuild weak bones, enrich anemic blood, and enable a malnourished mother to nurse her starving baby. Doctors use it to treat diabetes in West Africa and high blood pressure in India. And it's not only good for you, it's delicious. Thank you.
Is it on? Okay, can you hear me? Good, okay. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for your interest in this wonderful, fascinating plant, Moringa. And first, I would like to thank and honor Lau'ana for the incredible job that she has done in getting these projects starting, and it's really snowballing. I think it's wonderful. I met Lau'ana and Barbara when they did the presentation to the Green Group, I think about 2.5 years ago now. And as someone said, I am a serious plant junkie, and I had never heard of this plant. I was so fascinated. I thought, I've got to find some way to get involved at least a little bit in this project and try this plant out. So we did start experimenting with growing the seeds and have learned a lot in that process. There are some challenges involved in starting the plant. Germination rates have been very low, and I'm still experimenting and trying to look for ways to get better germination of the seeds. Let me show you what the seeds look like. My first successful planting was a group of seedlings, a batch that I started in about 2.5 years ago. And one of the things we've discovered is that because this tree is native to a more tropical, lower elevation, more humid climate, the tree comes from India. There is another species that's native to Africa. But they're used to a warmer, hot, humid environment, at least part of the year. And so attempting to start seeds in the winter can be frustrating. So, important fact number one, the best time to start the seeds is during this time of the year, and particularly when the rainy season begins. If you're trying to get the cycles in your favor, I would recommend that you start your Moringa seeds in June, just about the time it starts to rain. These were the last of this past year's seed pods. You want to pass them around? Okay. This pod is full of seeds, and it's interesting because It has a three-sided pod, which is quite rare, and three-sided seeds. This one's falling apart. Here we go. After the presentation, I'll share seeds with a few seeds with anybody that wants to get them started. The plant, when I put it in the ground, was about a little bit bigger than this. It was maybe 1.5 feet tall. This is a seedling that I started a few months ago. And very soon, this little plant will start to flower. They're very precocious flowering plants. But it took, after it was put in the ground, for the first year, it produced thousands of flowers and not a single seed. And in the second year, which was this past year, the plant that's in the ground now is 12, 15 feet tall and equally broad. And this past year produced a huge crop of seeds and is already doing the same thing this year. So here, these are some pieces that I cut off my tree. As far as pruning goes, you can cut material off this plant pretty much year-round. They do grow really fast if they're happy. And happy means good sharp drainage, lots of sun. They don't require a rich soil. They don't need a very fertile soil. They do benefit from extra water. And these, I've been out of town the last couple weeks. This tree normally gets a good deep soaking every few weeks. And I noticed that some of the leaflets are turning yellow on this, and I suspect it's just gotten a bit dry. But they're ideal for the poor soils that we have here. They seem to tolerate alkaline soils and alkaline water. So once you get your seeds started, it's pretty easy to grow these guys. Commercially in India, they're also grown from cuttings. And if you have a source of cuttings, again, the beginning of the rainy season would be the time to try growing these from cuttings. Now this piece, as you can see here, this is where I last pruned this particular branch. You can shape the tree pretty much any way you want it. If you have room, it will become a 25-foot tree, equally broad. If you don't have that much room, you can grow it in a pot. You can grow it like a privet hedge and just shear it with your shears. But what I do is I cut mine back fairly hard about once a year. And then during the rest of the year, I just harvest material off of it a little at a time. You can see this was where it was last pruned. Here's another one. I need 4 arms here. So yeah, you can see this was the pruning that I did in December. You can see how the lateral shoots have come out on the side. These are the flowers. It flowers year-round. These are the new seed pods that are developing. So the leaves, you can pick the leaves off. You can cut it back. You can do pretty much whatever you want with it, and it'll just keep growing. This is a leaf. This is actually a small leaf. It's a compound leaf. And what you're going to use this for, the way I harvest these, I just pick the leaves. I hang them up with clothespins on my solar clothes dryer, my clothesline, and just put a little sheet or something under them. And then they dry very rapidly. The leaf is quite thin. It's not at all succulent or juicy. So they'll dry pretty much overnight at this time of year. And then you can just crumble the leaflets off of the stems. So that's the primary use for these. Also, because they produce so many flowers, you can harvest the flowers and they can be cooked as a vegetable or used for tea. The seed pods, here's a new seed pod that's just developing now. This is at the edible stage right now. So last year I didn't pick the seeds. I really wanted to produce as many fresh seeds as I could. So I didn't pick them last year. But this year I am going to pick them. They're supposed to taste like asparagus. I'll let you know next time we talk. But you would cut these up and saute them with butter and garlic, for instance, and then they'll taste like butter and garlic. How can you go wrong with that? So with the goal of producing fresh seeds, I've had better luck with germination with the fresher seeds. So freshness of the seeds is really, really important. But still have not achieved the kind of germination that I would like to achieve. So less than 50%. I did give some seeds, a seed pod to some friends of mine last summer at the beginning of the rainy season. It was one of the first pods that ripened. They planted 12 seeds and they got 11 plants. So I do think freshness of the seed is really crucial. My next experiment is going to be with actually removing the husk on the seed. Because when you open the seed pod, these little three-sided funny little seeds are all lined up inside the seed pod. The husk, it's not like a nutshell. I can break it open with just with my fingernail. But even soaking the seeds, which I do recommend, the seedlings have a hard time getting out of this husk. So my next experiment, and if you come up and look later on, you'll see where I opened up this husk. This is a good, juicy, viable seed. So okay, thank you, 5 minutes. So I'm going to try removing the husks and germinating them that way. So if you want to grow your own from seed, I would recommend you try that. I think that's going to work. What am I missing? What have I missed? Okay. Germinating the seeds. I like to soak the seeds in warm water overnight. The husks do start to swell up, but I really think it's going to work to actually take the husks off and just germinate the embryo. There don't seem to be a lot of pests and diseases, and my tree, which is 2.5 years old, has not had any disease problems. A lot of people seem to have problems with leafcutter ants. And they are just the bane of our existence. They prefer my roses, and so they've left my moringas alone. So you can plant roses as a trapped crop. But they only last so long. Okay, I'll get to that. There is, if you're a serious organic grower, there is a remedy for the leafcutter ants that does seem to work if you have the patience to keep doing it. And that is to find another colony of leafcutter ants and to collect the mounds of stuff that they throw out of their colony. Does everybody know what I'm talking about? Ant poop. That's what we're talking about. Collect that from a colony other than your own and sprinkle that around your plants. And then the ants perceive that there is another ant colony in control, and it's said that they will not then attack your plants. And I've tried that on a limited basis, and it really does seem to work, but you do have to keep renewing that. If you're really serious about being organic, that's one of the few techniques that does seem to work against leafcutter ants. Other than that, I haven't experienced any disease problems with my trees. The moon. Okay, we're going to talk about the moon now. Let me talk about one other thing first. I know I'm running out of time. The other issue, these plants are now appearing in the nurseries, and so they are available if you don't want to go through the process of experimenting with growing them from seed or from cuttings. It's very important when you transplant these out of a small pot that you be as gentle as you possibly can be. The root is very brittle. It's a taproot that looks like a daikon radish. It's quite brittle. And when you transplant them, soak the pot first and then just ease it gently out of the pot. Give it a little tap. Don't break the root ball. Just be extremely gentle with the plant because that's when you're most likely to lose your plant.
Has anyone mentioned that another name for this plant is the horseradish tree? These roots are edible and taste like horseradish. However, the bark of the roots contains a dangerous neurotoxin. If you must eat it, peel it. Better leave it alone. Warn the farmers not to give it to their goats.
That's good information, Bart. I didn't know that.
Oh, it's in our booklet.
Oh, it is.
There's a
Okay.
big warning in our booklet.
About the bark
that.
on the
Don't
roots,
use the
the
bark,
skin
don't
of the
use
roots. Okay, good to know. Thank you. And finally, I've been asked to say a few words about gardening by the moon, which is one of the things that I do as a matter of course. I've been doing this for 30, 40 years, and I'm convinced that it works. And so if possible, you might as well use the natural cycles in your favor rather than just doing things randomly. So my experience with planting this particular tree is that it germinates most readily when it's planted right before the full moon. And that also helps it flower more at a younger age. So precocious flowering and seed production is part of that, catching that lunar cycle. So the week before the full moon for starting your seeds, if you're going to try cuttings or for transplanting a plant, I would use the third quarter, which is the week after full moon. So that's it in a nutshell. Any questions? Next full moon is May 25th. Okay, that'll be full moon in, is that Taurus, Scorpio, or is that? No, it'll be Sag. Okay, yeah. So just before that full moon, I would say maybe like your best day is going to be maybe 23rd. Yeah, okay. Good planting day, May 23rd.
David will come around with the microphone, so as soon as you've got a microphone, okay?
Jean, two questions. First of all, when can we get a copy of your book? And secondly, can you eat the leaves and the flowers raw, fresh, in a salad?
Okay. Lau'ana, do you want to address that?
The books are going to be available over by each restaurant afterwards. We're not allowed to sell anything in here, and there'll be other Moringa products there too. Barbara has some baby trees. Yeah. And about the flowers, they're very good sauteed, but in some of the books it says not to eat them raw. So on the safe side, either use them in tea for colds and medicine, dry the flowers for tea and medicinal purposes, or saute them. They taste like mushrooms to me. So they're very good. Just add them to beans or whatever vegetables and throw them in and saute them. Okay?
Just to let you know, we anticipated this conversation, so I've got 6-month-old trees and 4-month-old trees in front of Eve's to sell you for a very reasonable price. If you want to have a starter, it's a good time of year right now because it's right before the rainy season. So my car is parked right in front of Eve's, and then Lau'ana's brochure is also going to be there.
I'm not selling a thing. I have a few seeds left. It's interesting, the seed pods never came back around. I think the seeds have liberated. So I have just, and I appreciate you taking them, I have just a few seeds left if somebody wants a few.
We just have one microphone going around, so it's in the back now.
Okay.
I have two questions. One is how large a root ball is there? How, you're talking about this, like this.
How large will it get ultimately
Yeah, the roots.
in the ground?
Well, you're saying about putting them in pots.
Yeah, they will
So-
do very well in large pots. It's one of those plants whose growth is somewhat limited by the space it has.
Uh-huh.
The soil it's planted in, for instance, mine are planted in probably the worst soil on the planet. It's essentially sandstone that my guys broke up with digging sticks. And then we threw a little compost in there. It's almost as if it were growing in a pot, but it doesn't seem to mind a bit. Good drainage is crucial. Good drainage is crucial for this
The other
plant.
thing I wanted to ask is how invasive is it? Is it bringing the farm plant into the country? I know the lady said it's been all over Mexico already, but how invasive is it? Is it something like, I don't know, bamboo?
That's
that we have to worry
a
about?
very valid question, and I don't believe it is. I think that it's native to a wetter climate. It's native to the foothills of the Himalayas. And whether it would escape and take over the hillsides like the guaje trees have done, that's certainly a valid point, but I don't think so. Who's next? Go ahead.
I'd like to know if the booklet is also available in Spanish so that we can give experts.
Yes, the booklet is done in 2 languages, both Spanish and English, and all the step-by-step photographs of how to do it. Plus, when you buy a booklet, which again, we buy seeds to give free to the farmers, and we really appreciate that support, you will get seeds or a half a cup of the dried leaves to make your own tea or use it on eggs or tacos or whatever.
And my uses for this, just personal experience, I use it 2 ways. I dry the leaves and then I just have them in a jar by the stove, and I don't even powder them. I just throw them into everything the way you would do parsley or something. So I'm constantly using it as a supplement. And the other way I use it, this may not be completely kosher. I'm not a tea drinker, but what I do is when I make my coffee in the morning, I throw some moringa leaves in with the coffee. So it's kind of cheating, but it works for me. Okay, next.
Our Moringa tree is about 2 years old now, and it's been broken up by the wind ground level and cut a couple of times. Now it's about another 20 feet tall, but we're waiting for flowers to grow up and give us some beans. They don't.
It has a flower.
It has flowers for about 6 months now, but none of them.
Yeah, I experienced the same thing. The tree had to grow in place for more than a year before it began to set seeds. And there is a specific pollinator I've discovered for this tree, and it's the gigantic black bee, huge, big fuzzy black bee with an orange band around. That's the pollinator for the tree. So this year you may see some of the pods developing.
Let's hope. Thank
Yeah, I hope so.
I don't want to wait 2 years to get leaves to make tea. So next week, how do I make tea that I can drink all week?
No, I just want to reiterate, when I did this in the courtyard and had the big pot, I put 2 seeds just right in the soil, half sand and half soil. And they grew to be 10, 12 feet the first year. I had 3 crops of leaves, so you get leaves right away. It's the flowers and the pods that are, it took me 10, 11 months to get the pods, but not everybody gets pods the first year. So the pods take longer. Sometimes the flowers take longer, but you definitely can get leaves within a few months. Okay?
I had a moringa tree in South Florida. I moved here about 4 months ago, and I found that if you cut the branches on a diagonal top and bottom and just put them in the ground, and it's very sandy soil, it's only about 8 feet above sea level, they grow very, very well. As a matter of fact, I had branches break off the tree in windstorms and stick in the ground and grow. So it's very easy. It grows faster from cuttings than it does from seeds, if you want to try that.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Commercially, the plants are grown from cuttings, from large cuttings that are branches that are probably 1 inch, 2 inches across and 3 to 4 feet long. And they do it just like that. They're just sticking them in the ground at the beginning of their rainy season. So now that we have sort of a reservoir of people that are growing this tree here, we will have cuttings available. And I completely agree. It's a much easier way to get your plants going faster now that we'll have them available. Any other questions?
In the dry season, do we need to irrigate?
I water mine. I don't know if they would survive a full dry season without any supplemental irrigation. certainly in a pot they'll need to be watered, and the young plants will need to be watered. I expect that after a couple of years in the ground, a well-established tree could probably survive, but might defoliate partly or totally.
I think we're just about out of time. In the Middle East, we have plants very much like this. It goes by different names.
What do they call it there, do you know?
Well, one of the names is the manna plant. And you may know in the Old Testament, when the Israeli tribes were in the desert, they received manna from heaven. That's what they
There it is.
manna from heaven.
Yeah, yeah. A good comment. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate your attention. And if you'd like to come up and look at this close up, please feel free.
Make sure you turn your cell phones back on, and I'll just say something about the presenter next week. The topic is coping with stress. Writer-artist Judy Dykstra Brown and clinical psychologist Tony Moriarty will talk about grief management. Together they have written a book entitled Lessons from a Grief Diary, Rebuilding Your Life After the Death of a Loved One. The grief diary was Judy's own, written about the loss and recovery she experienced over the death of her husband. Audience participation will be welcome. Thank you. Could you please stack your chairs, put your cups away?
If you want plants, I'm at ease.
Thank you.
Okay.
It was an article that's on Facebook. I forget where it was.
I think we have time for one last question. Kelly, in 2006, when the war was still raging in Iraq, we had occasion for 10 days to listen to the news presented by Al Jazeera and the American news. Al Jazeera appeared to us to simply report the news. There was no emotion, it was just the news. As opposed to the American media, which leans it very heavily toward the Americans. You as a member of the media, how do you feel about that?
I don't consider myself a member of the media. I don't get paid for what I do. So I'm a freelancer. I would love to sell some stories, don't get me wrong, and it's one of the goals that I have with trying to finance a trip is to see if I can get a magazine to pay for some stories afterwards, after I get back. But I consider myself more of a citizen journalist and not part of the mainstream media. But don't get me wrong, if I was offered a job, I'd love to be in there and help change things from the inside. I think we're out of time, but I'm going to be hanging around here for a little while. Several of us are going over to Eve's for lunch afterwards. If anybody would like to join us, you're more than welcome. We'd love to have you. The clipboard is back by the bulletin board. Please do sign up so that I can stay in touch with you and let you know what's happening with the trip. And I just really want to thank you all for being here, and thank you for your help with Open Circle. Appreciate it.
Thank you. That was marvelous.
Let's get out and support her everywhere we can.
Our speaker next week is Dr. Todd Stong, our local expert on the health of our lake. Professional engineer, has been a volunteer advisor for 11 years for lakeside villages, governments, and for the health of Lake Chapala. As an act of faith to attract those simply curious about the lake, Dr. Stong will treat and drink lake water during his presentation. And this is in lieu, he says, of trying to jump across the lake with a motorcycle. So turn your cell phones back on, pick up your coffee cups, and stack your chairs. Thank you for coming. We're sure to see you next week, I think.
Thank you.
I really can't cure you. He tried many times and he couldn't cure the man. So he wrote a letter to this effect. He said, the only way that you can ever overcome this addiction is by appealing to a higher power. And he used the Latin expression that the spiritual can overcome the spirits. That the spiritual world overcomes the world of addiction. And very often, the metaphors that are used by addicts is, oh, I got high. And these are the same metaphors that are used in religious circles. Going up onto the mountain, experiencing this elevated consciousness. Only the world of the spirit can conquer the world of spirits. And of course, that's a central principle of the 12-step program. Sorry.
Please stand.
I remember a Dutch theologian saying once, first we say God is total mystery, and then we proceed to explain him as if we could. As a child, I learned we were made in the image and likeness of God, but it's been my observation that we make God in our own image and likeness, but that's all we know. With what the gentleman was saying before about
Hold it close.
our propensity toward religion or belief. I've often thought about the earliest people and when they began to believe in some divine creature. Is this something that's innate in us to, because we don't know what it is, we can't explain, we don't understand, but that doesn't mean it isn't real. Faith is belief is something you cannot prove or disprove, but you think it's true.
Okay. I think I agree with what you're saying. When in Buddhist cultures, instead of shaking hands like we do, we shake hands to make sure the other guy doesn't have a knife in his hand. The Buddhists go like this, right? Why do they do this? They do this to recognize the divine spark in the other person. What can we know of God? The only thing we can know of God is our neighbor's face. This is all that we can know of God. I was going to say something else profound, but I forgot. Oh, thank you.
Okay, we have two more questions. Alan, and then this one here.
First of all, I want to thank you very much.